For StateCollege.com, I'm Laura Nichols, here today with Paul Ruskin, Communications and Public Affairs Coordinator for the Office of Physical Plant. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about your background first? What brought you to Penn State?
Well, I came to Penn State, I think mainly something called adventure. Penn State is out in the middle of the wilderness, and I was a Pittsburgher. I grew up in Bethel Park, and to me, Penn State represented mountains and freedom. And I came here to join the Penn State Outing Club, to go skiing, to go kayaking, to take courses too. Of course, I was interested in archaeology, and I got my bachelor's in archaeology and anthropology. I got to work on archaeological digs at the bottom of Raystown. We did salvage archaeology at Raystown Dam before the dam was built, and the places that we dug are now about 100 feet underwater. So we did lots of good work to find out about the origins of the American Indian, and I got to help dig up some of the first Pennsylvanians. As a student, I was very interested in doing underwater work, and I was disappointed when I got here that Penn State did not have a scuba activity. So I was one of the founding members of the Nittany Divers, and I'll set the record straight on this. Penn State in those days did teach swimming classes in the nude. This is not widely known, but it is absolutely true. Before the natatorium was built, the Penn State classes were held in the Glenland building downtown, and we began the Nittany Divers in that building and gave the first diving lessons on campus. So I was an active student. I was really interested in cave exploration. I worked my way through school as a speleological research assistant. So I spent my weekends going to caverns, and the first week on the job I almost had a fatal accident. I was hanging. Basically what I did for the job is I hung on ropes and took rock samples in caverns, and my chest loop came undone, and I flopped upside down, so I was hanging 75 feet in the air by my ankles. The ropes on my ankles kept me intact. My helmet went to the ground, dropped 75 feet down, and hit the ground. It was carried away in a stream. So my first Penn State job, really, first week on the job, I was hanging upside down in the dark in a cave, and had no one who was able to help me right away. So I had to do an upside down sit-up and pull myself out of the cave. So I learned a lot about what it's like to work at Penn State early on. As a diving person at Penn State, my second job at Penn State was to volunteer for underwater research, and when the natatorium was built, I was tied into an apparatus in the bottom of the pool with scuba gear, and they would pull me forward, or they would pull me backwards with ever increasing weight while I had to swim forward. And over the process of the research, I got my weight down about 30 pounds from what I am now, and it was very interesting research. So I was a laboratory test animal for Penn State for a while. I then graduated, got my master's in radio, TV, film. Went off and joined the Air Force. I was with American Forces Radio and TV. I served in Texas, Alaska, and then 2 years in Spain. Had a great time living in Europe. Had a little sports car, drove all around Europe, and just had a glorious time. I then was getting out of the military, looking for my next career move. I had an agent, and I was looking for motion picture work behind the camera, not in front of the camera. My agent called me up one day and said, "Can you act?" And I said, "No, I really don't know how to act. I do behind the camera work." she said, well, I may have a job doing some acting, so come on down. So I went down to MGM Studios in Madrid. I had a screen test. My screen test was they had a young lady across the room, and I was to walk across the room, and she was sitting there with a cigarette in her hand. I was to walk across the room and light the cigarette. Well, being a dummy, I'd never smoked. I didn't know which end you lit. So I walked across the room, yanked the cigarette out, smashed it on the table, and gave her a 10-second lecture on the dangers of smoking. Suddenly there was all this applause from the back of the room, and I had a job in MGM. I was ultimately cast as the young cub reporter from back east. I was in the movie. It's called The Wind and the Lion. It is still being played on Turner Classic Movies. I got an offer from Paramount TV because of the movie job. I was to work in the Mannix TV series, and I never went to California. What happened was I had the business card from the Paramount TV director. I instead had a real job offer at Penn State doing TV production and running the Extension TV studios with Dr. Cordell Hatch. I took the Penn State job, came back to Penn State, and have been here ever since. Well, I'm a great believer in innovation, and the Segway is the most innovative transportation I know. Students will recognize my helmet. When you see this helmet on campus, that's me. You won't. When I'm inside the helmet, you can't tell it's me. But I'm several times a week. I'm moving around campus. I go to meetings. I have to go on photographic. I have to do photographic work around campus, and I will ride around the campus on the Segway. I can be anywhere on campus in about 8 minutes. The Segway is kind of like flying at 10 inches off the ground. You just glide across campus, and it is a phenomenal way to travel.
And how fast can it go, or how fast can you go?
The range is between 5 miles per hour and 15 miles an hour. If I have clear transit, I can do 15 miles an hour easily. I probably average around 10 miles an hour because I have to be careful. I weave around the students, and I don't want to surprise anybody. As I come up behind students, I will tell them that I'm approaching on the right or the left of them, and give them a little warning that I'm in the area. But it is a wonderful way to get around campus. It is very sustainable because I'm only using electricity. I am not using gasoline. It's not as good as walking. I walk a lot. But sometimes because OPP is on the edge of campus, I just don't have 20 or 30 minutes to walk to where I have to be. And the Segway can get me there in 8 minutes or less.
You mentioned sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the green efforts that you are making personally and also that Penn State's making?
Well, when I was a student, I was actually on the Penn State campus during the first Earth Day. So I've seen all the Earth Days except for when I was in the military. I was one of the original people to recycle on campus. Penn State now has a vast recycling program run by Al Matuszewski, who is a great guy and a guy who is dedicated to the Penn State recycling program. When I was a student, we had zero recycling. So as a student, I worked with the Eco Action Student Club to establish a recycling program on campus. We only had it on Saturday mornings behind parking lot 80, which is no longer in existence, but out behind East Halls. Now we have 5,000 recycle bins on campus. So I was one of the original recyclers. The other thing that bothered me when I came to Penn State is that I saw a lot of lights left on in buildings all the time. And my parents had always taught me, when you leave the room, you turn out the light. So as a student, I began, between classes, I would turn out the lights in the large classrooms. And in a minute or two, you could turn out hundreds of lights. And if nobody's in those rooms, I thought, we shouldn't be burning that electricity. Whenever a light's being used, that means that somewhere you're probably burning coal, and that coal is putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and causing lots and lots of problems. So I began turning out the lights. I did this in my undergrad and my graduate work here. When I came back to Penn State as an employee, I began what I called my light lunch program. I would go out on my way to lunch every day. I would walk through the buildings, turn out the lights, and do my part for ecology. And I'm happy to say that now there is a student organization. The Council of Lion Hearts runs something called Friday Night Lights Out. And every Friday night, about 20 or 25 students gather at the hub. They are given instructions as to where the large classrooms are. They're given some pizza and some Pepsi, and then they are let loose on the campus, and they go through the University Park campus and turn out all the lights that were inadvertently left on in the public spaces, in the large classroom areas. And that not only helps Penn State keep the cost of operation down, it cost OPP $2 million a month to pay. That's the real electric bill that we have to pay. So we can reduce that bill a little bit, but more importantly, we are reducing the greenhouse gases that are going into the atmosphere by not wasting electricity. So I really feel that my student career and my student classes continued right through to today, and I'm still continuing the things I began as a student.
Now, we just got through two days of pretty bad weather. I wouldn't say it was quite as bad as anything, further east, but Penn State is also known for its harsh winters. What is OPP doing now to not only recover from the last 2 days of rain and winds, but to prep for potentially, weeks of snow and ice?
Well, we really lucked out the past few days. A hurricane came through. OPP knew it was coming. We had good warning. We were very prepared. We checked all the catch basins. We checked all the drains. We did a review of the entire campus, and OPP technicians really prevented bad things from happening because everything worked. We were also lucky in that the storm was not as bad as we had expected, and we're in the mountains and we're away from the coastline, so we didn't have the problems that other people did. With that said, we did have a little bit of minimal damage. We had some leaking in the Sackett building, some minor flooding, and some branches down. I think there was one tree that came down. But overall, Penn State got off very well. So we got past that potential dangerous event with no real problems. We do now have winter coming, and we are all prepared. We actually, OPP has 1,300 employees, and that sounds like a lot, but the size of the University Park campus is huge. When we asked students how many buildings do you think there are at University Park, the average student will tell us about, they'll guess, 200 maybe. The actual number, if you count every building, is 940 buildings at University Park. Now that's counting every little shed. If you only count the big buildings, it's 540 buildings. So it is a small city. It is a massive operation. We have over 300 elevators. We have much to take care of when a major winter storm hits. We have 23 miles of roadway on campus and many more miles of sidewalk. And when a storm hits, we have to be prepared with the shovels, the bulldozers, the trucks, and the manpower and the womanpower to move all that snow off campus. We actually begin planning for this in July, and we are ready to go. We have about 100 tons of salt and anti-skid gravel piled up behind OPP. When the storms hit, we will ask the students to wear proper footgear, and then we will roll into operation. We have 3 teams that will work through the night, and in a big storm, we will have a couple hundred people out using shovels and snow plows and trucks to get the snow out of the campus, so that when the students wake up in the morning for the first period class, hopefully things will be in good shape and we can have the campus operate normally.
Seems to me like they have nothing to worry about then once the snow hits. They can certainly make it to class. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time.
Anytime, and don't forget to wear proper footgear when the storms hit.
You bet. And for statecollege.com, I'm Laura Nichols.